editions of Dungeons and Dragons out there that you already own most of, why should you throw your money at 5th? The answer is because it's new, and new things are better. But actually, 5th edition actually kind of adheres to that, and the fact that it's really the best one that's come out so far. I've played 2nd all the way up to 5th, and 5th really is the best, because right at the very base element, 5th really is a culmination of previous editions that they've had, taking what was strongest from all of them. And this really shows in the sense that they've taken the versatility and ambiguity from 2nd, they've taken the solidified rule system of 3rd and 3.5, and they've taken the ability to have options and do things if you want from 4th, slapped it all together and said, here's a new edition. And by that I mean that you can play it and you can easily see all the various elements if you know what you're looking for. And this is great because when you play each of these editions, something is glaringly lacking from all of it. 3.5 had way too much complexity in certain areas, in the sense that if you're brand new to it, well, guess what? You're being thrown into the ocean and told to swim for your life, because there's just so much shit. 2nd was, here's a game, here are some rules, and I hope you know how to figure all this out and make it work. It's possible, but it also has a steep learning curve in that sense if you're running the game or trying to really get into it. And then 4th was like, let's remove all those options and then we'll just sit you in this ironclad box and say this is, what you're gonna do. So that was a pain in the ass. 5th decided to do away with all of that and give you exactly what you really want, or what Wizards perceives that you want. And I personally feel they've done a really good job at it. And it's reflected in the classes. You can multi-class like you could in 3.5, but they've taken that ability to alter how your class plays from 4th by giving you 3 or 4 different ways to play your class that are vastly different. I mean, you've got the Eldritch Knight for Fighter, which allows you to be a spellcaster, like Spell Sword, and it works. And they've also got they've got one for just being a better fighter, and they've got one for being kind of like a warlord. So it all really works, and none of it really clashes. And they do it for all of them, so each class has a way to be better at it, or a secondary type of one other role. And this works to the benefit of everyone because, well, now you actually have options again. And then we move into the system. The system itself has been slimmed down as much as they really could. They've gotten rid of Fort, Reflex, and Will in the choice of just going, here are your 6 attributes, and just make a saving throw against them, which works. They've gotten rid of things like base attack and all that shit in lieu of a proficiency bonus, which also works, because you can then tailor that to also remove the need for magic items, which is phenomenal, because a campaign that required magic items was awful. So this makes that reinvigorates, like 2nd edition had, that magic items matter. And then they've gotten rid of things like these, +2s and all these floating bonuses for a very simple system called advantage and disadvantage, which is really that simple. You either have it or you don't. They cancel each other out too, and all it is you roll 2d20 and you take the better if you have advantage or the lower if you have disadvantage. That's it. And this makes the game, it sounds like you're like, oh, more dice rolling, that sounds terrible. But actually, it works, it flows really quickly because you're not having to remember all of these bonuses that you have or conditional things. And it also means that as a DM, your job is easier. Oh, you have advantage on that. You have advantage. You're at a disadvantage. Well, you have disadvantage. It's way easier than calculating severities and all that, which, realism, yes. Ease of use, not so much. And this idea of ease of use kind of permeates all of 5th edition's rule set, in the sense that I was once asked a question about how to do something that I had zero idea how to do. I knew I could look through all 3 rulebooks and find it, or I could just make a ruling right there. Turned out the weird ruling that I came up with was actually exactly what the ruling was in the DMG, which was great, which also reflects that if you have a working knowledge of the system, you chances are will actually get the right. If you come up with a ruling on the fly that fits with everything else, chances are it's the right ruling, which I think is just amazing, because previous editions had it where you could make a ruling, but then you'll have to tailor it later to fit with the system, because it may not have been exactly what they wanted. But the fact that if you have a working knowledge, I was able to come up with the ruling that they had in their book, is very indicative of the fact that they strived really, really hard to make this intuitive. Now, moving away from the system, because I feel I've touched on really all of its important elements. Actually, there's one more: character creation. In character creation, they've also slimmed it down to make it super easy, but they've also left options so you can make it a little bit more complex with the removal of feats to a different section of the game. Has made it so that feats are very impactful as opposed to just, oh, I get a +1. That seems kind of useless to pick. Why couldn't this be more impactful? Now they are. They're incredibly impactful. They're so impactful, they are the difference between gaining an attribute or taking a feat. Like, so just imagine how impactful that is. But moving outside of the system, they have redone the whole book in its design concept, art. 4th edition art was permeated with all of these action images to try and evoke this, combat. Let's have these epic action scenes. To actually, for the most part, there was a few but for the most part it was all action. 5th edition has decided that instead they're going to have some action, but they're actually going to have a lot more just stuff. Like, a drawing of a glass or a table, or, all of this art that really works with the pages that they're on, but they're not all action sequences. Most of them are actually non-combat sequences, which is really cool to kind of show that story element and the fact that we're focusing more on characters and things and scenery and setting, as opposed to, here's this really cool dragon fight, more system stuff. So, overall, you should get 5th if you're enjoying these ideas of story over combat. You like something about 2nd and 3rd, but you really also liked a little bit of 4th. And you're like, I really want all of these kind of put together in one good edition. 5th is where you're going to find it. I personally give it a 4.5 out of 5, mainly because it's still class-based, and I kind of have an aversion to class-based games, for the most part. I much like classless or class light. And this comes really close, but it's still not class light. But 4.5 out of 5, and I strongly encourage you to check it out. And go look at some other videos, go find some other role-playing games, and I always encourage you to look for other games that are not what you always play, because there's a shit ton of games out there and you really should play more.